us coffee, and we had coffee and biscuits there. We also went to an Outback evening meal that I didn't put slides in about, where we got to see the constellations in the dark. I mean, it was so dark. I mean, they turned all the lights off at the little place where they were feeding us, and someone was able to tell us all about the southern sky. It was just wonderful. And these are some of the different herbs and fruits from the desert area there. And quite honestly, I'm not going to tell you, I don't remember what all of them are. But Sue Schneider said this one on the bottom is really special. She got to eat it. And then we got to meet an Aboriginal group of women who are artists, and this Aboriginal Dreamtime Tour. And this young woman, I bought this bookmark from her, and she allowed me to take her picture. This is made, it's the design on here is bush medicine. It's kind of representing the different seed pods and stuff that they use for medicinal purposes. And this woman's name is Sherilyn Gibson. So Brian, you could pass that around, please. Thank you. I was a little disappointed. We didn't really get to meet Aboriginal people except at this experience. One day on the one of the towns, there was somebody playing a didgeridoo, which is a long horn, and I stopped, and he was collecting money, so I gave him some money, and he told me a little bit about playing the didgeridoo. But unfortunately, we never did hear one, see a performance using one, which sort of surprised me. Then we went on to Darwin, so we went inland, and then we went back to the coast. Darwin is a special place in that they had a Pearl Harbor type experience there in World War II. And it was the Japanese invaded or attacked Darwin without warning. And this is one of the bunkers they used to protect. This is just sort of fun. The museum there, that's a feather. And if you look at it, there's a boat painted on that feather. I just thought that was incredible. I mean, there was just so much art that we saw on the trip, but this was one that really stuck with me. And there was a tank. They had a lot of old equipment, military equipment at this museum. It was just a beautiful museum with a sad story. Have any of you been to Pearl Harbor? Have you? Okay. It's sort of a reverent kind of place too, because many people died. And this is a view of the Bay of Darwin. In Darwin, we also went to an alligator preserve, an alligator farm. And this is Charlie. Our tour guide was 32 years old. And he loves grandmas and grandpas, which is good, because everyone on our trip, I think the youngest person might have been 55. And the rest of us, most of us were in our 70s, I would say. And so Charlie, he chose to go in this tube to go into the alligator tank. So there's Charlie in the alligator tank. And he's pretending like he's petting it. It was so much fun having this young man be our guide. He was just wonderful.
Incredible.
Incredible.
Very enthusiastic.
Yeah, he just made it special. Now, if you see, there's a white thing hanging from that pole, and that's meat for the alligator to eat. So anyway, they're teasing them and trying to get it to eat. And Charlie got to see it firsthand. Yay! You're just in time for the alligator to eat. I'd like to welcome Sue Schneider.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I've been lost.
That's okay. We had a little trouble finding your little driveway, too.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're glad you're here. Sue traveled to Malawi. That's how Luella, Sue, and I are connected by hearts. We're sisters of the heart. And Sue helped me figure out how to get the slides going. And she's been to Australia and New Zealand, so may share a few experiences, too. This cloth here actually is a gift from Sue to me that I use on my piano bench at home. So this is Aboriginal art, as you can see. The interesting thing about Aboriginal art is they do not draw people. They do animals and medicinal things, anything that looks like berries or animals. I thought it was very interesting. I saw a few art pieces that look like boomerangs, and they said those aren't boomerangs. That is the image of a person cross-legged and a top view of that person. So that's how they represent people in their art. Oh, here. Oh, I think we've seen enough of the alligator.
Yeah.
And then we see Brian. Wait a minute, can we get it back? Brian got to feed one too from a, whoop, how do I get to go? Let's see, I need to get out of the, whoops. I want to go to the next slide. It's still on the video. Okay, there we are. Okay, so this is Brian feeding a little one. If you watch carefully, there's a little one swimming to the front, and then it's going, nope, there it goes. There's some kind of meat. I forget what they had.
I thought it was chicken.
It might be chicken, yeah, whatever. But Brian chose not to go in the tube.
No way.
None of us grandparents decided to do that. But Charlie was more than happy to do it for us. Then we went on to Melbourne. As Brian said, the R is not pronounced, so we flew from Darwin all the way down to Melbourne. Okay? And I can't remember how long that trip was, but
Probably about 3.5, 4 hours.
yeah. And we went to a museum there. We walked past this beautiful market with fresh food. There was an Olympic Park there. There had been Olympics there. I can't even remember what year, but this is the Olympic Park. Do you remember?
I don't remember what year they had it.
And this was one of the unusual buildings that was part of the Olympic Park. That was something I noticed too. The architecture in New Zealand and Australia is quite modern in some areas, and the windows are all different shapes. We tend to be more rectangular. Here we are at the gardens, and this is the Fitzroy Gardens, and just beautiful. And there were a lot of different birds too in that area. And then we ate near a water area, and that was one of the sculptures that we saw. Then on our way from Melbourne, we took a trip to Phillips Island, and Brian's going to talk about that in a minute. But on our way to Phillips Island, we stopped at a koala conservation center, and we saw wallaby. This is not a kangaroo. That's a wallaby. And we saw kangaroos up in the tree. See this little guy? Koala bear. And this tells about the koala's feet. The left one is the foot, and two of the toes are fused, and then there's that big thumb, and that is used for grooming. They said that the evolutional reason for that apparently seems to be for grooming. And then the top one is the hand, which makes it easier to climb, why it's separated like that, and the claws are really strong. Now, Phillips Island is a unique place in the world. Brian is a Pittsburgh Penguin fan. Usually he has a Penguin shirt on, but today he's sporting the silver fern from New Zealand. So as he talks a little bit about our experience there, I'm going to pass around a few things. If you look at this tea towel, you'll see these little penguins have a bluish tinge to them. Sometimes they're called fairy penguins because they're only 2 feet tall, as tall as they get. But Brian, why don't you come and tell us? They do not wear tuxedos. This, at the center where you come in to get your tickets and everything, they had this on display. You're not allowed to take any pictures while you're there. And Brian will tell you why.
As Karen said, I'm a Pittsburgh hockey fan, season ticket holder too, full season ticket holder. But this was very interesting. I never knew there were blue penguins until we went on this trip. And when we got there, one thing that's nice about going on a trip like this, you get preferred seating in most places. So we got to go down this long walkway down towards the ocean. And right at sunset, these blue penguins start coming out of the water, usually a dozen, 2 dozen at a time, all along the beachfront. And there's one light high up that we got to, but there were no pictures allowed because they bothered the penguins' eyes. So they would allow no flash photography or no photography whatsoever. They do have people that stand by, and if they do see you with a camera, they'll come up to you and say, put the camera away. So anyway you get pictures or anything, you have to buy a postcard or something like that. But it was very interesting. They walk right past us, up this little walkway, and they have little holes in the mountainside, and that's where they have their babies and whatnot. But somehow they all know where they're going. They went up this long walkway in the dirt. It was very interesting to see. And again, being with a group is so nice because you get basically front view, front row seating to look at this. It's really something to see. But again, every night, right at sunset, they've said, I don't know what, 1,200, 1,500 a night come out, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who counts them, but that's what we were told on the trip.
Yeah, they have a way to estimate it.
Yeah. But it's very interesting, folks.
Yeah, I would say that was really a highlight of the trip. I mean,
Yeah.
if you Google Phillips Island, Australia, they will show you the whole process. I mean, it's really, really nice. So that's if you want to learn more about it. Parade of the Penguins. Okay, so that was, no, those are little statues, yeah. And then, yeah, they didn't put clothes on the real ones. No, no, actually, they
Never know,
yeah.
they might trade them, yeah.
We were, 6 months before we got there, they opened this new, incredibly luxurious welcome center.
Yeah.
And to think that through the pandemic, they had to shut everything down. But these penguins, 365 days, I mean, this is a natural phenomenon.
Right.
The penguins still came and went through the pandemic, but the tourists did not. So I imagine financially, the devastation in all of the countries, since people aren't traveling.
Aaron, did you guys go to the Irwin, Bindi Irwin and her father?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't get to their,
I just wondered because they were recently on talking about the koalas.
okay.
Oh, really?
And I know they have an extensive program
Mhm.
to
Try, yes, thank you for mentioning that. No, we didn't go specifically to their place. This is another place. This is called the Zoo. So we stopped at the Zoo, and we got to feed kangaroos, and we got to see Tasmanian Devil, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. I knew the Tasmanian Devil was a cartoon character, but I didn't know it was a real animal. Wait till you see it. So anyway, here's Brian feeding a kangaroo, and they call it an zoo because these animals can come and go as they like. They are not in cages ever. They have this large preserve, and they come and go, so that you're not guaranteed that you'll get to feed one. and it was raining the day we were there, but they did come out.
That was the only rain day we had.
I think so. Now, if you look carefully at this mama kangaroo, look at her pouch. There is a joey in there, and he should be out of there because his head and his feet were sticking out. You know, she said he's failure to launch. Most of the other ones were out of the pouches at this point in the cycle, birth cycle, but this guy was not leaving. And the poor mother, I mean, he was just kind of dragged underneath. Whoop, why isn't it? It's not going to the next one. Oh, there, and that's a little closer view. Oh, there, now, you can see how poochy she is there. You know, I'm feeding her, and then I wanted to feed the baby, so the next one's a little blurry. But at the bottom, you can see his ears. You know, she's just dragging him along. And there he is. His nose is down. My hand is near his ears. But if you look, his feet, you could see his feet. It was ridiculous. I felt sorry for the mama. But it was sort of exciting, you know, to see it. And now the Tasmanian devil, it's an endangered species. And because we don't have much time, I'm not going to talk any more about that. I want to show you the guy. Look at his fangs. And he was in a captive area where they were going to show us his true nature. Now she's going to feed him. She's got some meat. He's trying to get to her, actually. Now he sees the meat. And she lowers it eventually, and he... she puts it on a string and then puts it out, and then he did eventually get it. But let me show you him eating it. Isn't that ferocious? I mean, golly. I mean, they said his jaw is so strong. I mean, it could snap your arm. Tasmanian devil, for real. All right, so from the Unzoo, we headed to Hobart. Now, Hobart is an island. Again, we had to fly from Melbourne to Hobart. And Hobart is the home of Port Arthur, which is a penal colony from the 1800s. And that is another example of Europeans taking over. It's almost like a Guantanamo. They brought prisoners from England, the British Isles, to be jailed in Australia. Imagine. And they had children as young as 8 who might have shoplifted candy or something. And they sent them to Australia. I just couldn't believe it. But this is the penal colony. And there was a church. It was run by a religious order, was involved. And there's the island where the children were, to be separated from the adults. Now, the museum there was pretty special. When you went into the museum, you got a card, and you pretended that you were that person. And then they had a wall of file cabinets, but they were vertical, and you pulled out a drawer that was vertical, and there would be a description of yourself, who you were, and what your crime was, and how long you were sent. It was just mind-boggling. I think I was a 21-year-old man who had stolen bread. I don't know. It was just terrible. I don't remember the date that was closed down, but it was closed down, obviously. Then we went from Hobart, after that great experience, we went back to Sydney, and this is the last part of our Australian trip. And in Sydney, we got to do a lot of special things, but there at the Opera House, we got to go on tour of it. We got to see La Boheme, the opera, which Brian can tell you about his opinion.
Yeah, that was interesting. opera itself, as I say to some friends back at home here, I said that's my first and last opera. So they had it all in.
It was so good that you'll never get a better one.
There you go.
Maybe. But anyhow, they had subtitles up on top of the stage. That was the hard part. You're trying to look at the words and then try to look down at the people, what they were doing, the performers, and it was just so difficult. We had great seats, again, going on a tour like this. We were like the middle of the row, looking right straight at the stage. We couldn't ask for anything better. But it was great. It was a nice first experience, but that's not for me. But they had English and I think Chinese or Japanese lettering above the stage.
Yeah.
And we also got to have dinner before the show on the outside of the Opera House.
Right in the harbor. It was just, it was just spectacular. There's so much more we could tell, but it was really special. Yeah, and the bridge, they actually had tours where you could walk to the top of the bridge. And again, it was 100 degrees. It was so hot. And there were maybe 4 people on our trip that paid, to do that trek to the top. And I do have a few pictures, but I didn't put those in because we shared pictures with each other. And there we are with the beautiful in the back. Here we are. This was the night that we ate out. And there's the La Boheme inside the Opera House. And then we met up with my cousin. I have a cousin who has lived in Australia for many years. And she met a fellow from California who was in Australia. They both were exchange teachers. This was more than 50 years ago, actually. And they married, and they lived in Australia. So my cousin Patsy is over here. And she changed her name to Sarah, and her husband's name is Frank, and he goes by Face, which is apparently a popular name in Australia. But anyway, here's a topiary of a koala. And then they met us at our hotel, and then we took a train with them out to their friend's home. And here we are eating with their friends. This is my cousin Patsy and her husband Frank. And as we sat at this table, kookaburras came and sat in the tree and laughed themselves silly, and we did too. How many people know about kookaburras? Do you know the song? Kookaburra sits in the oakum tree, Mary, Mary, king of the bushes, he. Laugh, kookaburra, laugh, kookaburra. That's not a monkey, it's me. So anyway, but the special thing here is that we got to eat a different kind of meat. Brian will tell us about that.
Believe it or not, we got to eat kangaroo that night. The gentleman at the far end of the table cooked it outside on a barbecue, and he said if you fix it the right way, it'll taste fantastic. And it was. To me, it tasted like steak. It really did. It was very delicious.
They had marinated it. We did not see kangaroo in any of the restaurants. And the kangaroos that are sold in the store, he bought it at the grocery store, are specially raised for meat. They don't go and hunt kangaroo anymore. They used to, but they're not hunted. So they are raised specifically for food. But it's interesting. Do you remember, Sue, did you see any in the restaurant?
No, we didn't see any of them.
Yeah, that's why kangaroos are not there, and they don't eat koalas either. And they lived, my cousin's friends lived on Mandalay Bay. It was just gorgeous, and they took us a ride around. It was perfect for us to spend that day with them because it was the National Australia Day, and Sydney was just overrun by people. We were going to take a ferry to their house, but the lines were so incredible. My cousin said, we'll just come and we'll take a train out to their place. And then they took a train back, they put us on a train back in that took us right to our hotel, which was wonderful. But that night, because it was the special Australia Day, we got to watch fireworks. This is right near the Opera House. And it was so hot that this is from our hotel room. You are watching this on a big screen TV. we were laying in bed watching the incredible fireworks. Some of our friends on the trip went down, but the crowds were like phenomenal and blah, blah, blah. So we had a wonderful evening watching these fireworks. Look at that. So that was celebrating. It's like their Independence Day, or like our 4th of July. Okay, I don't know how we're doing for time here, but we need to get to New Zealand. So Brian's going to switch hats. And now we are in New Zealand. Now on the trip, he had a penguin hat all the time, and he's going to tell you why he has these other hats.
Yeah, one thing was interesting on this trip. Everybody knew who I was because, again, since I'm a Pittsburgh Penguin fan, every shirt I had, Pittsburgh Penguins on it. I had a penguin hat. And it's interesting how will come up later, but our tour guide, Charlie, said on the last night we were having a dinner together, he said, "Don't you dare wear a penguin shirt to the dinner. If you do, I'm going to send you back up to your room." So that's why I went out and bought this New Zealand shirt, just for that night only. But and Charlie, since it was my birthday on the trip, it was like I think 6 of us had a birthday on the trip. We all got a gift from Charlie. He gave me this hat and he autographed it on the back. So that's why I really kept that. He was really, really a neat guy. I really enjoyed his time. So enthusiastic. He really kept us laughing on the trip. It really kept it positive and everything. So, but again, it was a positive trip too. But his enthusiasm was just very, very, very interesting.
Okay, so we flew from Sydney again. We ended up there after our tour of the country, and we went to Queenstown, which is the base. There are 2 islands that make up New Zealand. There's the South Island and the North Island. Some tours don't take you to both, but ours was called the Complete South Pacific Tour because we thought we're never getting back here. So anyway, we did the whole deal. So we flew into Queenstown, excuse me. And this was what we were met at the airport. I just thought this sculpture was just pretty special. The native people in New Zealand are called the Maori, Maouri. And I wanted to just share a little tidbit about the Maori. It's believed the first Maori people made their way from East Polynesia to New Zealand via the epic waka, which is a canoe, waka voyages sometime around the 13th century. So they were there first. And the fact that we call it New Zealand is because of the colonial people that came and discovered New Zealand. They have been trying to change the name back to the native, which is, I don't know how to pronounce it, Aotearoa. I know, but Aotearoa. Yeah, but it's hard to say. Which means land of the long white cloud. Because as they came on their canoes, there was apparently a large cloud area over the islands. So that's why they called it that. And there was, they tried through Parliament to change the name, but it's so hard to pronounce and so forth, they're still calling it New Zealand. But most of the tourist things, they're trying to encourage people to know what the native name is. It says one of the most epic, I'm not going to tell that legend, excuse me. For the Maori, handshakes and hugs are not the traditional greeting. Traditionally, the Maori people say hello with hongi, and I'm going to let Brian tell you about that in just a minute when we get to another part of New Zealand, how he was greeted on a special day. Okay, so this is our first night in Queenstown, excuse me. We had dinner at this beautiful place overlooking Lake Wakitipu. Lake Wakitipu, you got it. Anyway, it was just beautiful. It was many of the meals that we had, we combined with other tourist groups that came through, and they were buffets, but they were quite elaborate. And it was just a gorgeous view. And this is on our way to Milford Sound, which is like a fjord. It's just an amazing place. But this is on our way. We stopped at a place called Mirror Lakes, and I just love this picture. Can you see why it's called Mirror Lake? You see the mountain range, and then in the water. It was so clear, just beautiful. And this was the way we traveled to get to Milford Sound from Queenstown. And we had to go through a one-way tunnel, the Homer Tunnel. And they have lights on either end. So, I mean, you have to time it so that you can get through that tunnel before the next group comes. And it was a lot of timing. We were just so fortunate. Our bus drivers were wonderful. And when we got to New Zealand, we had the same driver for 10 days. It was really fun. He stayed with us the whole time. So anyway, we went through that passage there, and we saw lots of running water, some glacial activity. You can see the white up there is glacials. The main thing about New Zealand, the difference between Australia and New Zealand at this time of year, was it was cooler in New Zealand. It wasn't cold, but it was comfortable compared to the hot that we experienced in Australia.
60s and 70s.
Yeah, it was beautiful. But this just gives you some views as we went down, and beautiful waterfalls. It was raining part of the day. They gave you slickers to wear. And these are sea lions, those brown dots on that big rock. That was pretty special to see a bunch of those. And here we are on the back of the ship. It was just really, really a gorgeous day. And we had a meal on the boat too. And more waterfalls. This one, I think. As we got closer, actually, we got so close that we got some of the mist from that waterfall. And then the next day we went on a 4-wheel drive adventure. Brian is a chauffeur by trade. He's just recently retired. So Brian did not drive the 4-wheel drive. But tell us about it, Brian.
That was interesting. They started, Karen and I, in the very back of this little 4-wheel drive vehicle. It was not pleasant. It was very bumpy. I mean bumpy. And the driver was real nice. He let anybody wanted to sit in the driver's seat to take a picture. So like Karen said, I did not drive it, but I did talk to almost every driver on our trip. So, and the bus driver we had, it was really fantastic too. But this was a great day doing this, and some more pictures coming up.
Yeah, it was a 4-hour tour, which I can't say, it was just fabulous. Look at this view. I mean, this view is just breathtaking. It's beautiful in the picture, but in person it's amazing. This is the land where the movie Lord of the Rings was.
Yeah.
And so this tour, this 4-wheel drive tour, they talked a lot about, every time we stopped, they talked about the scenes from the movie. So you that are aware of it, Brian and I are not Lord of the Rings people, but it was fun. Some people took the tour just because of that. So if some of it looks familiar. Now this is where the first bungee jump was ever performed. You see this little, on that bridge, that white outfit place is where people jump off of. And the first bungee jump in the world was done in New Zealand. And if you ever watched late night, Stephen Colbert, he has a series where he was in New Zealand. It's really fun if you ever get to go on YouTube and watch that. He went there and had, for a week, he had different things. He did bungee jump.
From that bridge.
Yeah, but there was a farmer. It was a farmer in New Zealand that was looking for something adventurous, and he discovered this and perfected it. And now bungee jumping's all over the world. There's a closer look at it. We didn't see anybody jump off that day, but people were getting ready to. And here's a little video to give you a feeling. Oh. It's quite bumpy. We're in the middle of a creek. We're riding in the water. There's Brian. But we're right in the water.
Okay, Brian.
This is our friend from England. Anyway, that was pretty exciting. And I'm panning for gold, and Sue would like to share.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, when we were there with the bungee jumping, there was a couple who were getting married.
Really?
And the bride jumped off in her wedding dress. They didn't get married while they were bouncing up and down, but it was part of their wedding, apparently.
Oh, that's too funny.
It was just bizarre.
There are a lot of extreme sports in the world, but this, bungee jumping is not on my bucket list. We did see one other adventure as we were going, I forget where. They had big little balls that you could be in the ball and go down the hill in a ball. Oh my gosh.
When we were in Queenstown, we were looking down on a soccer field.
Yeah.
And people were in these bubbles. I mean, they're about this big.
Huge.
That
Yeah.
surround you, and they were playing like bumper person.
Oh,
bumper
yeah.
Okay.
cars in their bubbles, and I think they were trying to play soccer too. But they're just bumping into each other. It was hysterical.
And people pay money to do that. But again, the scenery, just beyond imagination. Then we went to see sheep shearing. And this guy, he's got his sheep in tow. And then he is working on him. But I'm going to show you a short video here. And at the end, you got to pick up some, this is from our sheep But the sheep are so happy to get rid of the wool. He's not complaining, that sheep. It took you,
5 minutes?
yeah, about 3 minutes. A good sheep shearer can do it in 3 minutes. But that was exciting. We went to 2 different areas where they did that, different parts of the state. So there it is, a pile of it. And if you Google Shrek, the sheep, there is on the internet, and the gentleman told us, Shrek is a sheep that did not want to be sheared. And he went 6 years before they found him and took that much off. It's really fun to look at that. Shrek, the sheep. Just Google Shrek the sheep. Yes, yeah. That is 6 years growth. They need to do it twice a year to be healthy.
Right.
I mean, it is amazing. Now, we went to Mount Cook next. We spent one night there. And Mount Cook, there were a lot of clouds, a lot of cloud cover. And if you look carefully, you can just see between those break in the clouds, that's a peak at the peak. You can peek at the peak. I was so excited. I was sitting in this little park because we hadn't seen the peak because there were so many clouds because it's so high up. But anyway, I was sitting in this little park in front of our hotel, and the clouds, parted enough to get a peek at the peak. That's Mount Cook. Now this is a museum that I went to in Christchurch. And I'm going to pass this shell around. These are P-U-A-U, pua shells. And my little earrings are made from the pua shell too. So Brian, if you'll pass this around. But these are gorgeous. And this is a man who built a house, and you can see the shells all around. The entire house had the shells, and his children, when he passed, he willed it to this museum. And they recreated these rooms in the museum, which I thought was pretty special, really. It was a donation. But these are shells that he collected in his many years of life.
Oh, it's like a clamshell?
Yeah, well, did you see it? Yes, it's closed, but it has holes, natural holes, yeah. I don't know if that's to breathe, for the oyster or whatever animal inside. But they're huge. I mean, that's a little one. I bought that. And the other special thing about Christ Church is we had a home visit. They divided us up. If you chose, again, it was a special thing. But there were three couples of us that went to this beautiful home. And this lady's name is Barbara and Richard Rowe. And for 40 years, they've been hosting people in their home on these tours. It's a group called Home Hosting Unlimited. And there were 6 homes that our group went to. They divide us, into, anyway. So, but everyone had the same menu. So, the host family had to prepare the same meal, which was a rack of lamb, because we ate a lot of lamb in New Zealand, a rack of lamb, and the dessert was this pavlova, which is a very special layered dessert that was phenomenal. But every family made it, and she was very proud of her pavlova. And she had her table set with her crystal and her china. It was just special. And her husband had just gotten out of the hospital. I mean, she should have canceled, really. He was not well at all. But she did it because it rejuvenated him that evening. It was really interesting. But I thought, oh my, to host us. But she didn't want to disappoint us. So it was just a lovely, lovely evening. And then this is a little comic relief. This is one of the bathrooms. The bathrooms, Brian said he was important for him to go to a country where bathrooms were,
Kind of playful.
and flushed. So anyway, but this is just a mural outside a bathroom. Can you see the people's feet and their panties going down? If you look at it again, these are their legs, and they've got their pants down. Anyway. And then this I thought was fascinating. This is for feminine products. It was like a little robot. I just had to take a picture of it. But that's so you don't, when you get rid of your menstrual products, you don't have to touch anything. So it was remote control. I came out laughing, and people said, "What are you laughing about?" And I said, "Look at this." And there were several other bathrooms that people spent time taking pictures of. There were some that were totally automated. Just amazing. Like you push a button and the door would slide open. You get in, the door would slide shut. Very, very interesting. They're way ahead of us in technology. But I thought that was kind of cute. At first I thought, what is it? And then their yield signs. I think we should have give way rather than yield. I don't think people understand what yield means in our country. Nope. You agree. But I thought give way was a good sign. Okay, so now I got to keep moving along here. Now we're in Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand. So we have crossed the area from Christchurch was our last place in the South Island. Now Wellington's in the North Island. So we took a ferry to the North Island, and now this is Wellington. And this building here is their capital Parliament building. It's called the Beehive. Isn't that interesting? I mean, the architecture I thought was unique.
Because it looks like a beehive.
Yeah. And there were a lot of the silver ferns there. Brian's wearing a shirt with a silver fern, and we'll see some pictures later on, but there were a lot of silver ferns around this building. And here's a kiwi. Kiwis are the country's bird. You notice the kiwi doesn't really have any wings, and it is endangered because it can't fly. It can't. And evolution-wise, it had no predators for years and years. I mean, it didn't have any predators. But when the colonists came, they brought in things that were predators, and they're almost extinct, kiwis, because they can't get away. You know, they can't fly away. They have no way to protect themselves. I thought that was very interesting. Then they had special cable cars. Here's a cable car, which remind us of the incline here. And then I'm going to go quickly through these, but we went to a beautiful rose garden. The roses were just gorgeous. That's not a rose. What is that? That's anthurium. Okay, I see a lot of those in Hawaii. And that's not, yeah, I'm not sure what that is. But the roses were just gorgeous. I love yellow. Yellow roses are my favorite. And then this museum is called the Te Papa Tongarewa. And it's the National Museum. It's an art and history museum. And this exhibit, these are, if you can see in the shadow, there's a regular sized man who's looking at this tableau. Those are huge. They're like 5 to 10 times the size of a real human. And this was a sculpture themed exhibit that we were fortunate enough to be there to see, but they were so huge. I just couldn't get over it. And these are all tableaus of World War I, and how the Aussies were involved. And here's a nurse, huge. It tells more about that, but she was just gigantic. It was amazing. I was so happy we got to see that. And then this is an art exhibit within that building that is string, colored string. But there it is hanging. And then I got the close-up. If you look carefully, that design, it's all string, the way the string is wound around those. I thought that was pretty unique. And then there was a wall with these envelopes, and they encouraged you to write a message to leave in the envelope, and you were encouraged to open the other envelopes and read what people wrote. Well, I thought it was a clever exhibit, and it might be something like a Sunday school could do. You know, to do that, to have a wall with these letters, and then people could write messages. I don't know. But I felt compelled to write something to leave my mark. Oop, where's it going? Okay, so I wrote a little poem. It says, traveling makes the world a smaller place. Seeing love in someone's face, across the miles, seeing many smiles. And I stuck that in an envelope. So hopefully somebody picked it up and read it, and I felt a part of the exhibit. But I thought that was kind of cool. I mean, you can see my little pinky. I'm taking my picture. Picture with my picture. Okay, and then these are going to be kind of quick. Different villages or different towns that we visited, we're set for tourists, really. But this is a licorice company that we all bought lots of licorice that day. But you can buy RJ's licorice at Trader Joe's. I think it's Trader Joe's, which they told us after we bought bags full of it. And we got on the bus and we all thought, how are we going to carry this home? So we ate some on the trip, but I found a way to bring it home and to share with people.
You found a way.
But I thought, oh my gosh. They said, oh, well, you can buy it at Trader Joe's. But this was very expensive because, and then this town, their theme was gumboots. And this was the ladies' room. But here's Brian. He's got a gumboot in his hand, and you're supposed to throw the gumboot. They have like a gumboot festival every year. I mean, it's like, what?
I think I threw it. I'm lucky if I threw it 100 feet.
They're kind of heavy. And then,
I think the furthest was like 300 and some feet.
yeah. Yeah, it would be like any tossing softballs and see how far you can throw a toss ball.
Yeah.
No, gumboot. That's what they call the boots that they wear in the field. You know, like a rain boot. Let me go back so you can see the. Whoop, for some reason, anyway. Oop. Okay, he's got it in his hand, but it really is one of the. Yeah, see that boot? That's rubber, and it's what they would wear in the field or to muck out the barn, a gum boot. Yeah, no, I appreciate that you're thinking of something you would chew. Okay, I'm glad you asked, because you're like, what are you throwing? And he's got one in his hand. And I just love that. That was a bag that I picked up for someone. And here's another sheep. I'm not a sheep show, and there were 18 different species of sheep, and they brought them out one at a time to introduce the sheep. They each had a unique name. Anyway, they lined them up there, and they had food for them to eat. That's how they stayed so good, standing there. And then they did a sheep shearing show at that place. But that was fascinating that there were 18 different species. And now we're in Rotorua. This is a geyser. I'm going to show you that again. Rotorua has the most Maori folks. I think 25% of the town is of Maori heritage. And there's a heritage center there. I didn't put pictures of that in. But you have to prove that you have, I think, 10% Maori heritage to be an apprentice at this particular cultural center. And they're trying to pass the crafts on, you know, how to do it, how to do the sculpting. And jade is the main jewel, gem in New Zealand. In Australia, opals are very famous from Australia. And we got to see opals and jade tours and so forth. They're very interesting. But this is a geothermal geyser area. It's called the Puhutu geyser. And it's not as big as Yellowstone, but it was pretty special to see. And there's a kiwi, and here's a kiwi egg. They're really big eggs. But they, part of their endangerment is that other animals will come and eat their eggs, too. I mean, those were predators that were brought in from, okay. So Brian is going to talk here. Here's Brian. Whoop. I'm sorry. Let's start. We're getting towards the end. Brian, explain what's happening here.
This was on my birthday, February 4th. We decided to go out to dinner at this village of the Maori people. Started out at our hotel. We went probably half a mile to this center, described some of the Maori traditions and whatnot. Then we got back on the bus and went to this village. And as we were traveling, the bus driver was describing different things about the leader of the tribe or whatever, tribe of each, and different attributes. You got to be strong. You got to be a strong leader. You got to be, what?
Take your shirt off.
Suppose you take your shirt off, but I did not. and other things like that. And then all of a sudden he says, "Oh, Brian, are you ready to do this?" And I'm sitting there at the back of the bus like, what am I getting myself into here? I should have realized it. It was my birthday that they would pick me. So, and this is at the beginning of the evening where these gentlemen, Maori people, came up a boat along this little creek area, and I was meeting the one of the chief-like people, and there was a fern on the ground. And I would pick it up, walk back, and then I had to walk towards him, and we would like touch noses.
Here we go.
Like 3 times. That's how we greet each other. No, twice. And people in the background, like Karen, others of the group, were supposed to be very quiet, not say anything, not even take. I don't think they were allowed to take pictures. And I was the leader of the group, and our group name was. You got it down here someplace?
Whoop, no, takupi.
What?
Takupu.
Takupu was the name of our tribe. I had to try to remember that all evening, and that was really tough for me. I don't remember. But we went to each part of this little village, and they did different things. And me being the chief, I got to pick people to do things. So I was not always liked by people. So, but they kiddingly joked about it, but they did all like it. So here's where people, they have a stick, and then he tells you in their native language, go right or left. And you had to try to catch a stick before it hit the ground. So he'll say something, and then they'll each try to run around, either right or left. We did about 4 or 5 different things throughout the village, and then at the end we got to eat dinner. There's a couple on the left, the lady and the gentleman in the center. We got to meet them as soon as we got to our trip. Started our trip.
How do we get out of the video? Okay, now
At the airport, they got our sign with our name on it. Now this is another part where they call it the Hawkeye Dance, and we were following our leader. And at the end, you're supposed to open up your mouth, stick out your tongue, and ah! That's how you scare the other people.
And to this day, they use it. They do the Hawkeye Dance before football games. The idea is to challenge the other person, to scare them off. That was why they did the tongue. And I also learned that having the tongue out, many of the sculptures show that position, and the Maori people were not considered cannibals, but they did, if they were in war and people died in the war, they did sometimes eat them as spoils of war, which I thought was fascinating.
You ate your enemy.
You ate your enemy, but it was not considered, I don't know. Well,
Right.
they don't talk about that in that in none of the history people there said that, but they mentioned that the spoils of war were eaten. It's like, okay, to me, yeah.
I'm just going to mention that before I travel, I like to read books, and I read one about a woman who went to New Zealand as a graduate student to do some studying, and she met a man there, and she married him, and she was studying the Maori traditions and stuff. And the title of the book is "Come on Shore, and We Will Kill and Eat You All."
Okay, yeah. So that's,
It's a memorable title.
yeah, right. So anyway, to me, that's cannibalism, but just as with our history, we try to make it not as unpleasant.
Now, where were these people originally started?
From Polynesia, other islands further out, Samoa and so forth, and they came by canoe. And in the 13th century, they're thinking New Zealand, the islands of New Zealand were started.
Now, that's not the only one. Will they speak English, basically?
Yeah.
Well, they have their own language, but the whole country speaks English, yes.
Basically, the whole New Zealand.
Yes, and New Zealand and Australia, they speak a form of English. It still, has a different accent and different words.
Did you say that?
Pardon me?
Did you say they also have a second language?
Yes, the Maori people do. And they're trying to preserve that. They're trying to teach the children it. But it was a language that wasn't written down.
I mean, this whole New Zealand. You talking about?
Yes.
Oh,
So they said it's only in the 19th century that they started to write down the language. It was just passed down by word of mouth. So I'm going to show you a little bit of this dance. Again, you're trying to scare away people. Whoop. Okay, let's get out of this. Let's get out of this. Okay, we
All
want
right,
to.
enough of that.
Yeah. Anyway, it was fun, and those were all the men on our tour. Okay, how do we get to the next?
That was our leader that night.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sticking my tongue out, too. And then we had a wonderful meal that was cooked in a big pit. The pit is in the lower right corner there. And they had these big trays that were layered in the pit to cook the food. It was,
Cooking all day.
yeah, it was delicious. And there's the fern. This is their national flower. And it's green on one side and silver.
On the other side.
See the silver? It's pretty amazing. We're getting close to the end here. Let's see. Okay, and then another village. This is on our way to Auckland. We saw this village that their specialty is corrugated buildings. Now that building was the welcome center. It looks like a sheep, but it's all made out of corrugated material. I thought it was very unique. And there's a dog that's all corrugated, like roofing. And I love this saying, coffee with a friend is like capturing happiness in a cup. And Bodrum is a place in Turkey. This is a Turkish restaurant. And I've been to Bodrum, Turkey. So that was special to me to eat at this place. And now we're in Auckland. This was our last stop in Australia. And as we came across the bridge, you can see the Space Needle there. That they call it the Sky Tower. And we were like, oh, look at that Sky Tower. That's really cool. And when we got to our hotel, that's outside our window. We opened the window. The window was, the shade was closed. And we opened it up and it was like, wow, this is so cool.
1 block away.
1 block away. It was just, and we got there like at 4 p.m. and it closed at 5. So everybody just dropped their stuff and ran up there because that was our opportunity to see it. The sky jump. People jumped off, and from our room we could see people doing bungee jumping off that tower. And,
Thank you.
and here we are at the top. Brian's afraid of heights, but there were lots of nice windows. And they had one, like in Chicago, if you've ever been to the tallest building in Chicago, they have the floor where you can stand there and look down. So that's what we're doing there.
You were.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, Brian was like off to the side. Take a picture.
Thank you.
Yeah. And from the top, it was kind of interesting. For some reason, this one canal, they had red or pinkish paint. I forget why.
I don't remember either.
But here we are looking out. And that's from our bedroom at night. It was so cool. So that's Auckland. We weren't there very long, just 1 day. But then we were going to leave, and our plane was delayed, so we had an extra day, which was a blessing.
That was the
So
only snafu on our trip.
yeah, so rather than go back to the city, we stayed at the hotel that they put us at. And this is a seed pod. I think it looks like Mick Jagger's lips. So that's why that picture is there. Do you think Mick Jagger? Maybe. But I don't know what kind of seed it is. I should look that up, seed pod.
From a tree?
Yes.
It was Cape Cod.
I don't know. And then I'm going to read this to you because this was such a wonderful thought at the end of our trip. This was on the side of the hotel. It's called Fly, You Pretties, also known as Tree of Life. From its strong roots supporting firmly through to the towering trunk and canopy above, Tree of Life provides shelter, comfort, and protection. The sculpture is a representation of Jet Park, which is the hotel we were staying at. Caring, nurturing, providing an environment of hospitality and family. And it was an oasis for us. we were at the airport. Our plane was delayed. We didn't know how we were going to get out. We wanted to go to Hawaii, blah, 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 and we were tired. Oh, no, what's going to happen? And this hotel, they put us up. They gave us $100 for a meal. It was just wonderful. I feel, again, a blessing having done that. And there's the sculpture. So you see the roots and the tree and then the birds flying. I mean, it just meant a lot to me at the end of the trip to have that beautiful, beautiful sculpture. And then here's Brian. We're ready to go to the airport finally. Look at the luggage that we had to carry back. We were the bag people. Oh my golly.
Only allowed one big suitcase per person.
So we had the black and the purple.
Yeah.
And they were 50 pounds. I mean, we had to weigh them, and they had places. So they're 50 pounds, and then we could bring those carry-ons. That was kind of crazy. And then we went to Hawaii. This end is, many people in our tour went on to Fiji, but we didn't want to pay to go to Fiji. We chose to go to Hawaii. We have friends in Hawaii. This is their home. And here we are with our friends from Hawaii. I'm a speech pathologist, and Debbie was a very dear friend of mine in Morgantown, West Virginia. And her husband, they're both originally from Hawaii. And then we're saying, hang loose, which is the Hawaiian farewell and Hawaiian way of saying, have a good day. So that's the end of our trip. Thank you for listening. I appreciate being asked to do this because it got me back into our wonderful, wonderful time there. I didn't mention some of the food. The barramundi was a fish that was so wonderful. Flounder, shrimp, prawns, huge prawns. I mean, I call them shrimp, but they were just huge. Lamb, beef, kangaroo we ate. And the other fact that I just want to share is that Kate Shepherd in New Zealand in 1893 started the women's movement to get the right to vote. And 2000 was our 100th year of the women, at least white women, having the right to vote, 100 years. But New Zealand is the first country in the world that established women voting. So they were celebrating 120 years when we were there. And there were a lot of displays talking about Kate Shepherd. She was the woman that got it going, but it was passed in their parliament in 1900. So 2020 was their 120th year. 100 years ago in the United States, women got the right to vote. The women. The men could vote all along, just as in Australia and New Zealand. Men could always vote, but the women didn't have the right to vote in New Zealand till 120 years ago, 1900.
20 years before the U.S.
Yeah. Right. So I think for me it was significant to be there, when we were celebrating in the States 100 years, and to realize, who knew, that it started in New Zealand, a little small country in the world. So I'll end with that. We have other things to look at, and thank you so much. Yes?
Wasn't an emu from New Zealand?
Emu. They were, I think, mostly in Australia. Yeah. And we didn't see any, really. We didn't see any ostriches either. Did you on your trip? Because I think of...
We saw emu in South America
Okay.
and ostriches in Africa.
Oh, I thought... Yeah, I really don't know.
Another bird-related fun fact from New Zealand is that the Kiwi, they're nocturnal, and they're what about this tall or
Yeah.
so. But the egg takes up 60% of the bird's internal cavity.
Yeah.
They lay that egg.
It-
So, imagine having a baby that's 60% of your entire body.
Oh, that's... Well, I want to add...
Know that.
Yeah, I want to add one more story about Kiwi. Is anybody here from World War II? A veteran from World War II? Well, they call people from New Zealand now Kiwis. And the reason they're called Kiwis isn't because of the bird. During World War II, there's Kiwi shoe polish that is made in New Zealand. And the soldiers from New Zealand had the best kept boots of anybody. And so they were teasingly called the Kiwis. They called them, you know how men nickname everybody. So they called them the Kiwis because of their great boots and their wax boots. Well, the other interesting thing was when we were leaving Auckland, and we were worried about where we were going to stay that night, we heard over the loudspeaker that they were bringing a plane load of Kiwis back from China. People who were living in China but needed to get back to New Zealand because of coronavirus. We were so out of the news loop. This was February 10th. And they were going to quarantine them at an air base. They were flying them back, but there were 200 and some people that were going to be quarantined. And that was the first that we really heard how dangerous, or, you know, what was happening. And we got back to Hawaii, and we were beginning to hear about it, and we got home before it all cut down. So we feel very fortunate. And this Charlie said that the next group after us, he had another tour after us. It was very hard for him to get everybody out of New Zealand in time because they were starting to shut down airports all over the world. He had, you know, he got people home, but he was an amazing young man, you know, to deal with that. And then everything shut down, and I feel bad for the tourists, you know, the countries depending on tourism. Even Hawaii now is not back to allowing people to come.
And they're telling people not to come to Hawaii.
Yeah, which is amazing. So anyway, enough said.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
On
Oop.
the kiwi,
Yeah.
it's the only bird that has its nostrils at the very end of its beak.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
One question, when you were out of the urban areas, did they tell you about all the poisonous snakes and spiders and insects in Australia?
Yeah, they really didn't stress that. We were pretty well protected.
I wonder why.
Well, we stayed probably 4- and 5-star resorts the whole way through. Something that, you know, if Karen and I ever, you know, try to go ourselves, we would never pick 4- and 5-star resorts. Too much money.
Yeah, right. I mean,
We probably got a good rate being a, you know, a 30-people group. Originally, I heard, I think it was supposed to be 38 or 40 in our group.
and people canceled.
People canceled because of the fires
Yeah.
and, you know, stuff. So as Charlie said, 30 was a good number for the
Yeah, it
group.
was a good.
Really, it was really a good number, something he could really control well. And,
Yeah, it was just
thank God
wonderful.
we got back before it really hit here.
We'll tell you other things individually. Thank you. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Daryl.